Hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 2022 Pro-Life Gala. We're so happy that you could join us, and we're going to be starting in about 5 minutes here. So in the meantime, why don't you drop us a comment and let us know where you guys are watching from. Again, we're starting in about 5 minutes, so be ready. Hello and good evening and welcome to the Circle of Life Gala for 2022. My name is Sam Throwness and I'm going to be your host for this evening. A special thank you to the hosts that are having a watch party by inviting your friends and family to view this gala with you. We hope that you're enjoying the little box of treats that was delivered to you earlier today. Be sure to take a group picture and email it to the email on your screen or post it to social media with the hashtag Circle of Life and you'll receive a special hosting gift. Just for fun, you can also post it in the comments of Facebook or YouTube so we can see who's all watching with us tonight. Does anybody have more than 10 people watching with them? We would love to hear from you and see how large the biggest group really was. We know that there's several classes and youth groups watching tonight as well, and that's awesome. At this time, I would like to ask Pastor Greendyke to open up our evening for us with a prayer.
Almighty, faithful, gracious, and good-doing Creator of the heavens and of the earth, it is thy word that says that in thee we live, move, and have our being. No one individual is self-existent. Thou art the giver of life, the provider in all of life, and the sustainer of life. Every single human being that walks this earth, that's carried in the womb, that comes to the end of life, is known by thee. And we give thee thanks, Lord, for such a glorious and precious truth. We give thee thanks that despite we sinning against thee, thou art gracious and mindful of us, giving thine only begotten Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, whose conception was holy, whose life was righteous, and who can be the Savior of sinners, conceived and born in sin and shapen in iniquity as thy word teaches, but can save sinners for thy great name's sake, for Jesus' sake. Lord, as this pro-life organization seeks to disseminate, to spread around thy truths, as they care for so many, instruct so many, counsel so many, put out every effort to set forth the preciousness of life from beginning, from conception to end. Bless their work, strengthen them, encourage them. And oh Lord, we pray, wilt thou, with all these efforts, give thy divine approval. And with all they do, may it all be to thy glory. For the shores of everlasting glory will reveal that these labors, this work, has not been in vain. And may it be for the preservation and the glorification of many souls, young and old, to enter into glory, to be forever with thee. Lord, bless each and every one. Hear and answer our prayer. Pardon all our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Greendyke. It's so heartwarming to have so many people join us tonight. This is our second virtual gala, and we're building on the success of our first. We're so glad that all of you here could make it tonight. In the midst of a pandemic, not everything can be normal, but that doesn't mean that we can't have some fun. So, we have an awesome lineup of some great speakers, some entertainment, and some fun built in with some prize draws, so make sure you stick with us. If you have a phone with you today, can I ask you to please get that out? we're going to be doing some contests this evening, and you will need to be able to text this number on your screen. So please take a minute to enter this number into your phone. The number is 778-400-8002. All right, let's have some fun, and let's see if we can't build a little bit of togetherness, even though we all have to be separate during this time. Are you guys ready? So first, make sure that you have our texting number on your phone. That's 778-400-8002. Now, I'm curious to see how many different ways that you know how to say the word life, and in how many different languages. So quick, brainstorm how to say the word life in as many different languages as you know, and text them to us. Or if sending an email is easier for you, you can send us an email at admin@chilliwackprolife.com. Now, there's going to be 2 rules. The spelling has to be correct, and the words must be in one text message. And remember, folks, no cheating. We're working on the honor system here. So there's going to be 2 prizes here. One for the person who sends in the most translations of the word life, and if there are more than one, they're going to be entered into a draw. And also, every 10th correct entry is going to be entered into another prize draw as well.
Here we have hiking poles with a $100 gift card to Mad Butcher from Meadow Valley Meats.
So we're going to follow up with you and let you know if you're a winner. If you're on Facebook Live or YouTube, it's going to be announced in the comments, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. The second prize we have
is tea for 2 with a teapot, some mugs, and a whole variety of tea.
Next up is Alex Shattenberg, the Executive Director of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, who will give you an update on what's happening on the euthanasia side of things in Canada. Immediately following Alex's talk, there will be a clip from the Fatal Flaws documentary created by Kevin Dunn, showing the true story of a girl, Candace, a Canadian girl, living on the East Coast. Both her and her mother felt extreme pressure from her own doctor to ask for assisted suicide, and they share their story in hope that it will prevent other families from having to go through the same thing.
Hello, my name is Alex Shattenberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, and it's a short message for you. So yes, there's a lot of concerns right now in Canada. The recent euthanasia numbers have gone up by about 30% in 2021. So there's been this continual climb in the number of deaths, and there's been a lot of pressure put on physicians and nurses who will not participate in euthanasia and assisted suicide. And this is of great concern. So as bad as things look, there are some things we could do. Recently, a bill C-230 was presented in the House of Commons by Kelly Block, a member of Parliament for Saskatchewan, and this bill is to protect conscience rights for physicians and nurses and pharmacists and other medical caregivers who do not want in any way to participate in euthanasia and assisted suicide, which is now referred to as MAID. This bill is primarily doing 2 things. It's to protect physicians and medical caregivers, etc., from being bullied, from being pressured, from being intimidated in order to participate in euthanasia and assisted suicide. It's also to protect them from losing their jobs or from losing an opportunity to have a job for these reasons alone. So this is a very important piece of legislation, and I urge you to contact your members of Parliament and say, I support conscience rights for medical professionals. I support Bill C-230, and urge them to vote in favor of it. When we talk to members of Parliament, though, the best way to do so is to try and tell something of a personal story or to add a personal flavor to why we're supporting conscience rights. And one of the best reasons to support conscience rights is to say, I, as a person who opposes euthanasia and assisted suicide, I want to have a doctor or a nurse who will oppose euthanasia and assisted suicide. I want to have a physician or a medical caregiver who will not feel pressured in my time of need to pressure me towards euthanasia and assisted suicide. And the only way that's possible is if we have conscience rights. We need Bill C-230 to pass, and I'm urging you to get completely behind it. Thank you very much.
If I had to go ahead and do what the doctors wanted me to do, I wouldn't have had her.
What was that?
Well, they wanted me to do assisted suicide death on her.
This is your story. You said a couple of things on the CBC News story. I remember they said, did you want to die? And what did you say?
I don't want to. She got sick here at home. We got the ambulance. When we got her to the hospital, she was having seizures. They had to give her medication, take her heart rate down. Her heart rate was very high, talking 170. This doctor that was seeing her first, and he came in and he told me that her kidney wasn't in the right spot, He told me the lower parts of her lungs had collapsed, so they admitted her. And the next day, when he came in, he took me out in the hallway and he just stood me up against the wall and he told me about assisted suicide. Death was legal in Canada. And I said, well, he asked, did I know? And I said, no. And then he said, he was all for it. And I said, well, that was your choice. And I told him I wasn't interested in anything to do with assisted suicide death. And he told me, he said, I was being selfish and he wanted to assist me in doing this. And I said, I'm not interested. I more or less walked away from her. She heard everything.
Yeah.
And
You heard what the doctor said?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Not very good.
like not once did she ever say to them, I want to end my life. Not once.
You said they talked about it a lot. Did they talk about it a lot with you?
Yeah.
And this doctor came in and next day after he told me about the assisted suicide death and stuck his face down in hers and said, do you know how sick you are? And I'm just like, and when I got his eyes contact, I went my eyes like that to get out in the hallway, and I told him, I said, don't you ever pull something like that again.
So at that time, were you worried that Candace was going to die?
They had us told me that she was dying. I believed them. They were the doctors, and she was so sick. So, but I told her if she wanted to go, it was good. She could go. But she didn't. She don't cry, honey. But she didn't want me to be alone. Don't cry. It's all done now. It's over. We just don't want it to happen to anybody else, hey?
No.
Don't want another family to go through this.
That sure was a moving story, and Alex's update shows us the importance of engaging with your local MPs. On a lighter note, I think we're now ready for our first door prize draw of the evening. This one will be for the early bird registrants who signed up by January 31st. The winner is going to receive this awesome basket with a beautiful Afghan recently handcrafted by a generous donor. Are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
The winner is Janice Barton. Congratulations! Please come and pick up your prize at the office on Patton Avenue next week. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you our president, Laura Kingma, our pregnancy care counselor, Laura Lynn Cartmel, and Janita Terhar, our secretary, who also coordinates the Compassionate Care Program.
So Janita, you head up our Compassionate Care division, and so can you tell me what you do with that?
Yes, I started Compassionate Care in the fall of 2021.
Yeah.
We have 3 different programs, and I'm hoping to start another one in the spring. Right now we have our bread deliveries, so every Tuesday I go out to my 35 clients and I drop off bread and check in on them and see how they're doing. We also have a phone pal program where some of our seniors just need someone to talk to. And we also have resource guides. Seniors call often asking for help with groceries or help with moving companies, so I always give them the information that they need. In the spring, we're hoping to start up a vegetable line to provide the seniors with little extra food for them.
That's great. And have you enjoyed it?
Yes, I've really enjoyed building a connection and a relationship with my clients over the past months.
That's great. Do you have any great stories that you can tell? I know there's probably lots of different things that happen week to week, but is there something that particularly sticks out?
Yeah, one that sticks out to me most was the first week I was working with Compassionate Care. A senior lady called asking me to help her find a low-income moving company to help her move. She told me her budget, but I knew it was impossible to be able to find a moving company that would be able to do it under her budget. So I called around and I contacted a local school here in Chilliwack, and I found some student volunteers to help her move. She felt so blessed that there was someone out there that was going to volunteer their time and help her move into her new home.
That's amazing. And that's a real big part of what you do is building relationships with your clients and seeing what their needs are.
Yeah.
So what is your main purpose of what you do? What's the main purpose of doing the bread deliveries? And
Well, number one, building a connection with them and showing them that there is someone out there that loves them and supports them through a difficult time that they're in, but also providing them with bread and extra food that they need.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's great.
So how long have you been with Chilliwack Compassionate Care?
I've been with Chilliwack Compassionate Care since last October. I learned about you guys from a brochure, and I was surprised to read that and the nice services and that you provide for the elderly in this community, and I thought it was very impressive.
Nice. And how have we helped you out in the past year?
It's been very nice just to think that somebody cares for somebody. Of course, a lot of people, it's an elderly building and people need help, and to see that somebody cares, to be so consistent, and the fact that you knock on a door, it has an aspect of safety as well and comfort. And it's very nice. One other example, last summer that happened during the highest temperatures of the year. It was one of the hottest days, and so happened I was I was dealing with some health problems. But I came in and I found this nice fan by the door. I didn't think it belonged to me.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful thing that I appreciated very much.
Yeah.
And having that, the bread, nice bread, every day, it makes a lot of difference. Some might think, well, it's a loaf of bread. Yes, it is. But, for somebody with mobility problems or somebody that has difficulty, it is one of the items that you need to go frequently to the store.
Yeah.
You can go to the store once every 2-3 weeks and buy all kinds of stuff. But bread, it's a different thing. It's a very effective, very nice thing, very helpful.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to help you out, and we're really here to support you.
I really appreciate this, and I'm really glad to help out with whatever I can in return, of course, because it's a caring thing. It's today you don't see a lot of care around. Everybody seems to be single-minded and minding their own business, but it's nice to see people helping each other.
Yeah. It really definitely is.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, Laurelyn, it's your turn. I got some questions for you. Do you want to share a story? I mean, you've been with us for a long time, so you've got lots of stories, but I feel like this last year, there might be a particular story that would stand out to you that you could share with our community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say that our biggest story this past year would be, like you say, Laura, there's many, but would be the flood that happened in Sumas Flats. And through a relationship, I heard of needs that moms were needing diapers and formula, and we were right away, jumped right on it. We were busy for the weekend. We had our van full of, our mobile unit full of diapers and formula and wipes and clothing and whatever moms needed. And we went for quite a few days. We just went out and we drove around and just gave people what they needed. And it was great because it was such an opportunity to build relationship with people in a different community than right close to where we are. And people were really grateful, and it gave us great exposure. And I would say that was probably the highlight, is just seeing some of the devastation, but then how you can, just in a small way,
Bring them some joy.
yes, bring them joy, and making sure babies are taken care of. So I would say that's been the highlight this year.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Okay, so considering the flood and the current world situation, there seems to be a lot of people in desperate situations. And how do you see how that's affected here, your work here in the office?
Right. So the one thing that I can say about this last couple years, but even more so in this last year, that we have a lot more women and married women who already have children and that are secure in a good place in life, but just due to what the situation is in the world, they've been very reluctant to have another child. And so this past year especially, we've really seen our numbers go up in women that were seeking out abortions. And, you know, sometimes we get to know what the outcome is, but sometimes we don't get to know what the outcome is, whether mom has chosen to keep baby or whether she's aborted baby. So that's been very tough on our whole team here at the Crisis Pregnancy Center. And I just that part alone, there has been many, many good outcomes, but I know that there's been some tough outcomes. And for us here, it is part of adjusting to what's going on in the world, but also what can we do to change the way we deal with things, the way we deal with women coming into the office. And we just, it's just been tougher that way, but also very rewarding. We make sure that we focus on the positives and pray for those that we don't know of what their outcome. We don't always get to know.
No. So we've got more clients, and now you're going to be doing more training. So are you excited about that?
Yes, I'm very excited to go forward, even with the mobile clinic being used in a different way than what we have been doing in the last little bit. It's that vehicle is such a blessing, just even for picking up stuff and bringing it and delivering. And it's given me a great opportunity to be able to go to clients' homes and visit with them on their own turf. And they're much more vulnerable and willing to just want to share their lives with us so much more, which is great because then we get to see where they're at and see what the needs are there. And it's just been a really good opportunity to use that van and build relationships. And I'm excited going forward for the changes and the things that we're doing and the expansion and working with new staff. It's really exciting, and I look forward to see what happens in the future.
Me too. Well, thank you guys both for all that you do. And may the Lord bless us and keep us going for the future and be a help to all those in need.
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you so much to Laura, Laurelyn, and Janita for giving us some insight into the day-to-day operations. Now, we have two local musicians for you, soprano Tiffany DeLoof and accompanist Trishelle Beakey, who will be performing Baby of Mine by Alison Krauss.
Your so precious to me, sweet as can be, baby of mine. All of the people scold you, what they'd give just for the right to hold you. From your head down to your toes, you're not much, that we know, but you're so precious to me, sweet as can be, baby of mine, baby of mine.
Thank you so much to Tiffany and Trishelle for that beautiful, beautiful piece. Now I would like to introduce to you Marion Niels, a board member and outreach coordinator for Chilliwack Pro-Life. She hopes to share with us how far Chilliwack Pro-Life has come since our 2021 gala, with some of your support and with some goals for the upcoming year in 2022.
Thank you, Sam. Good evening, everyone. Tonight is about celebrating how far we've come because of your support. Tonight is about taking an exciting step forward into the future to save more lives. We are a heart-centered organization that seeks to create a culture of life, a culture of care for women, babies, the elderly, less abled, and their families. We know that the needs of our clients are greater than ever before. Abortion and euthanasia stats have gone up in Canada because of the pandemic. Yes, there was so much uncertainty this past year, but our organization, we doubled down on our commitment to serve our vulnerable clients in spite of the challenges we encountered. For example, when our clients couldn't come to us, we came to them. Our mobile unit has been such a blessing in a time like this and an incredible help in reaching the elderly and women. Because of your faith in us and in spite of COVID, we've worked with organizations, churches, and presented in several schools about the value of human life. Our scholarship committee is also looking forward to reviewing applications this spring, so please consider applying. Our pregnancy center is currently open 3 days a week. However, our office is open all week, and Laurelyn is always monitoring our phones 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and always available if her clients need her. Our goal this year is to open our doors for 5 days a week. Could you help us fill this need? We also look forward to bringing our mobile clinic to places like Agassiz, which has an abortion pill dispensing facility. This summer, it was heartbreaking to see the elderly suffering because of the heat wave. So with your help, we stepped in and delivered fans. We hope to expand this extreme weather response program. We also plan to develop daily check-ins for Chilliwack seniors, as this is an identified gap in services. Thank you for helping us develop this so seniors feel less isolated. In our compassionate care program, we especially help the most vulnerable elderly people who have the least support. Clients that are choosing between paying their groceries or paying for their medications. We sometimes are their only contact, their only ray of light all week. The elderly are sometimes choosing death as the loneliness is too unbearable. Our goal is to expand our program to service quadruple the amount of clients this year. The waitlists in other Chilliwack programs are very long. Can you help us stand in the gap? Some of you may be interested in supporting our social media campaign for 2022. Women and youth are hurting and they're looking online for support. We'd like to be there for them to help them choose life. We are indebted to our monthly donors. Your gift is something that keeps on giving. So for all of you who are here tonight, would you consider partnering with us on a monthly basis? And if you aren't already a member, we would so appreciate if you'd sign up tonight. Finally, I just really want to thank our dedicated staff, volunteers, and board for surrounding our clients with love and providing life-giving services. And to God for giving us strength. To all of our supporters, you have been the bedrock of our organization for 42 years already. We are proud to have one of the longest standing pregnancy care centers in Canada. And we look forward to the future with hope, because your support turns our organization's dreams into a reality. I hope you have an enjoyable evening with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that inspiring talk, Marion. Just so you know, Marion organizes pro-life presentations for schools and churches tailored to a specific course or topic. There's also an event activity package specially put together for groups and clubs. You can contact our office for more information. Now, what you guys have all been waiting for, the main feature for this gala. I would like to introduce to you Melissa Ohden, all the way from Kansas City, Missouri. What Melissa had to go through as a baby is a heart-wrenching story. But with God's help, she's turned it into something beautiful.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Melissa Ohden, the founder of the Abortion Survivors Network, and I am thrilled to be joining you tonight, even if it's virtually, for this night as we celebrate the Circle of Life and the incredible resources and support that you are providing there in your community of Chilliwack through the Chilliwack Pro-Life Society and through your local pregnancy care center. I was so honored to speak with Juanita about the services that are being provided there in Chilliwack and how you were really on the cutting edge of what is happening for pregnancy care services there in Canada. Of course, you've heard a lot tonight through the team there at the Pregnancy Care Center about just how much the resources and support have continued to be needed throughout this time of the pandemic and how they've used all of this for good. We know that in the midst of the most difficult circumstances, God still brings about good. And certainly that's part of my life story and my message that I'll be sharing with you tonight. But I just wanted to share with you my excitement alongside you with the incredible work that is taking place through your Pregnancy Care Center because of your support. To be the first mobile unit for a pregnancy care center there in Canada, I just couldn't be more excited with you and for you, and excited about this incredible impact that you are making right there in Chilliwack, in your surrounding area, and really the message that that sends to everyone across Canada about the vision that you have about the needs of women and men and the children that you save through the results of those efforts. So let me be the first to just say how excited I am and thank you. Thank you to the team there at the Pregnancy Care Center for really answering the call and knowing that now is not a time to be complacent and wait for somebody else to fill in the gap or wait for circumstances to change. I mean, isn't that the very thing that we're communicating to women and men in their time of need, is that every challenge is an opportunity. And if we looked at the storyline of my life and the circle of life through it, that would also be another one of those messages. Every challenge is an opportunity. I know many people know my life story, as I've been involved in pro-life ministry now for almost 15 years. I can't even believe that when I say that, because it's just been, of course, kind of an interesting journey, you could say, for me, but a blessed journey to leave my own career and join the pro-life movement and, do the sacrificial work that all of us are engaged in. But this has been part of my journey. And the reality is, as we look at every challenge being an opportunity, we know that my birth mother had so many challenges 44 years ago. And my birth mother looked an awful lot like the women who are coming through the doors of the Chilliwack Pregnancy Care Center still today. My birth mother, Ruth, was 19 years old. She was a college student. She wasn't yet married to my biological father. And just like so many of the women that you are serving through your pregnancy care center, my birth mother fits another big statistic, and that's coercion. No matter if it's Canada, the United States, or other places around the world, we hear so many people describe abortion as a choice and a right. But I'm sure if you sat down with this team, you would hear story after story of women just like my birth mother, Ruth, who really had no other choice except abortion. And that is one of those circumstances that we are all called to help change in this world. Women deserve true choices, true resources, true support, just like you are providing through your pregnancy care center. And that's what I love about the mobile unit, is that it provides even more choices, more resources, more support, overcoming those obstacles and barriers that so many women in your area face when it comes to receiving those resources and support they need and deserve to make a life-affirming choice for their child. In my birth mother's circumstance, we now know that she was not given any other choice. Then the door that led to St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa, back in 1977. And that was the door that led to the forced abortion that took place on her against her will. You know, we know statistically so many women, over 64%, identify feeling pressured into their abortion. And we know through the stories of so many women, just like my birth mother, Ruth, there are also so many women who are literally forced to have an abortion against their will, whether it's at the hands of their boyfriend, their husband, well-intentioned, oftentimes family members or friends, members of the medical community, even members of the clergy. I've heard more stories than I can even bear sometimes about the painful realities that women have faced. But we know through my birth mother's experience that it was a member of her family, just like so many women, who forced this abortion upon my birth mother against her will. Having an unplanned pregnancy at that time in 1977 was not something that my maternal grandparents were pleased about. And whether it's 1977 or still today, we hear these storylines being played out in the lives of so many women, the circumstances of so many families. It was my maternal grandmother, a prominent nurse in their community of Sioux City, Iowa, who forced that abortion upon my birth mother against her will. She had the means and ability to do so. She worked hand in hand with a local abortionist on a regular basis on the OBGYN floor. And of course, they didn't believe anybody would find out that it wasn't Ruth's choice to have the saline infusion abortion that was meant to end my life and forever changed hers. They never thought anybody would hear from me. But clearly God had other plans in my life and in Ruth's. I know it's not ever pleasant to hear about abortion. It's not pleasant to often talk about abortion outside of our kind of pro-life circles. But to understand the circle of life in Ruth's life and mine, you need to understand a little bit about what God has done in my life. So I'm going to share a little bit about that procedure with you. That saline infusion abortion that was forced upon Ruth against her will involved injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding me in the womb. The intent of that toxic salt solution was to poison and scald me to death from the outside in. So if you read about that procedure online, you'll read about how children like me are actually called the red-skinned or candy-appled babies because that toxic salt solution would turn the skin bright red as it peeled it away and moved internally into the organs. If that child was fortunate, and I say that in their terms and not mine, if the child was fortunate enough, their life would be ended within about the first 24 hours. And then the next 24 to 48 hours were spent inducing a woman's labor with the intent of that deceased child being expelled from the womb. We know through my medical records, though I didn't soak in that toxic salt solution for just 24 hours or 3 days, I actually soaked in it for 5, while they tried time and time again to induce Ruth's labor with me. It is a horrific abortion procedure, not only for the child, but for the woman. And I now know over those 5 days, they started to believe that maybe Ruth was going to lose her life in that abortion procedure too, because things just simply were dragging on too long. On the 5th day of that abortion procedure, though, they finally succeeded in inducing her labor. And that is the day that I was accidentally born alive. I am essentially the epitome of what many people think of when it comes to a born alive infant, a child who is born alive in the final step of their abortion procedure. I now celebrate the day that I was accidentally born alive as my birthday. But have you ever stopped to think about that? You have a birthday. I have a day that I was accidentally born alive. The gravity of that is never lost on me. I am forever grateful for my life. But the reality is, that day, something else was planned for me. And I wish I could tell you that when I was accidentally born alive in the final step of that abortion procedure, that all of the medical professionals saw my inherent dignity and value and immediately provided me medical care. But this isn't the way stories like mine are often lived out. Like so many children, some even from Canada, if you haven't ever read through your government reports, Canada is one of the few governments that report out the number of born alive infants after failed abortions, and you have hundreds each year that survive failed abortions and sadly are not provided medical care. I know what that's like, because I now know that when I was accidentally born alive that day, there were demands made to leave me to die. And I now know that it wasn't my abortionist like I was led to believe for many years. It was my own grandmother, that maternal grandmother who forced the abortion upon Ruth, who was there heavily monitoring the abortion. She's the one who demanded that I be left to die. And as hard as that is, I think, for people to hear, I hope that you can still see the humanity of my grandmother in the midst of that. When we are called to love people, we are called to love people just like my grandmother, people just like my abortionist, people just like my biological mother, Ruth. This is not a story of just pain and suffering. This is a lesson in love and forgiveness. And I think we can all celebrate her humanity, that she deserves to be loved and forgiven. And we can even more so celebrate that there were nurses on staff that day at the hospital who defied my grandmother's very orders to leave me to die. My mom and dad were told over the years that there were likely 2 nurses who fought for me that day. But we now know that there is one particular nurse who rushed me off to the NICU at St. Luke's Hospital, defying my grandmother's orders, believing that if other people found out that the abortion had failed and this little girl had lived, that maybe they could provide medical care that would sustain my life. An ordinary person, just like you and me, who by the grace of God did something extraordinary that day. She said, yes. Yes, Lord, we see this little girl and we see her humanity, and we are going to do whatever we can do to try and save her life. Ordinary people just like you and me are called by the grace of God to do extraordinary things. That is the work of your pregnancy care center. That is the work of your Pro-Life Society. That is the work of all of you who pray and witness in defense of lives like mine and lives like my biological parents who deserve better than abortion. And you would never know. I know, I can kind of laugh about it now. You would never know by looking at me that I should have been poisoned and scalded to death in the womb. You would never know if you passed me on the street that I was initially laid aside while those arguments took place about whether I would be provided medical care. You would never know by looking at me that the prognosis for my life that day when I was rushed to the NICU was actually very poor. When I was rushed off to the NICU, I weighed a little less than 3 pounds. I was a whopping 2 pounds, 14 ounces, which indicated to those medical professionals that my birth mother was much further along than the 18 to 20 weeks that my abortionist had indicated on my medical records. And of course, having ultrasound here at the Pregnancy Care Center, I'm sure your sonographer could tell you how far along they probably think I was just based on my weight alone. 31 weeks. That's what a neonatologist remarked in one little tiny quarter of my medical records after I was rushed off to the NICU that day. Based on my weight and the way I presented myself, my birth mother was probably more like 31 weeks gestational age. If we needed any kind of a reminder why ultrasound is such a powerful tool when it comes to lives like mine being saved, and women like my biological mother having their hearts turned in love towards their unborn child, I think this is a really great testament of that. Ultrasound provides this incredible window to the womb and shows the truth in a way that saves lives like mine, that touches the hearts of women and men every single day. So what an incredible resource you have through your pregnancy care center, and even more so now with the portability of that ultrasound. But that was my humble beginning. You would never know that when I was rushed off to the NICU that day, the prognosis for my life was poor because I was presenting with a multitude of health issues. Severe respiratory and liver problems, jaundice. The doctors even thought I had a fatal heart defect initially because of the amount of distress I was presenting with. And sadly, we know we live in a world that somehow wants to put a disclaimer when they hear those kind of instances about lives like mine or maybe someone in your life. People have honestly even said to me, well, Melissa, isn't it great you turned out the way that you have, but what if my life still had meaning and value, as does every life, regardless of circumstance. And of course, like so many other circumstances in mine, the doctors were very wrong about what the future was going to hold for me. I've been proving them wrong time and time again by the grace of God. But my adoptive parents, my mom and dad, were told every poor future prognosis for what my life might hold. And I am forever grateful that, just like probably many of you in this room who are adoptive parents, my mom and dad didn't hesitate for a second to open their hearts and their home to me. Those descriptions by the doctors didn't define their love. They didn't define who I am. And so my mom and dad opened their hearts and their home to me, knowing that they were called to be my parents. And if you can see in my eyes, all these years later, no matter how many times I've shared my story, I still get emotional about that. Because I believe every child deserves the opportunity to be loved into life the way that I have been. Every child deserves that opportunity to be loved by their biological parent or adoptive parent. Every parent deserves the opportunity to fall in love with their child, whether it's a biological parent through the services and support of your pregnancy support center or adoptive parents just like mine. And I am so grateful that I was raised in a home from my youngest age to know that I'm adopted and loved. I was raised from my youngest age to be a person of faith. That is very much part of my story. And like many parents in my mom and dad's position, they kept my survival story a secret. That's certainly part of that redemption and the circle of life that I now live out as the director of the Abortion Survivors Network. I get the opportunity to come alongside survivors like me and parents just like mine who grapple with how and when and what to tell a survivor their story. We are connected with abortion survivors from there in Canada, and I truly believe over time, as we heal them, empower them, and equip them to find and use their voice, you are going to hear more stories of survivors like me from Canada. You're going to hear more stories of parents like mine who have been impacted by a failed abortion. But years ago, there was nobody for my mom and dad to turn to. And so they felt like keeping my survival a secret was the best thing that they could do, because they never wanted me to have anger or resentment towards my biological parents. And they were afraid of how the knowledge about surviving an abortion would impact my life. And so they did keep it a secret. But I truly believe God intended for me to know the story of my survival. And he allowed it to come forward in a very unplanned and unexpected kind of way when I was just 14 years old. My older sister, as a high school student, faced an unplanned pregnancy. And like so many of the women who come through the doors of your pregnancy care center still today, she had fears and anxieties. She questioned how she would be able to complete her degree. She was a grade 11 student at the time. She had fears and anxieties about how people would treat her, what my parents might say. And so, like so many women in that position, she contemplated every decision, which included abortion. I'm grateful that our parents learned that she was facing that decision, and they felt like they were called to do something really important. They felt like they were called to break their silence, tell her the story of my survival, hoping that she would understand just how big of a decision she was facing in her life. They were hoping to save the life of their grandchild and, of course, save the life of their daughter who was facing that decision. I am happy to tell you that my oldest nephew is now about 30 years old. My sister, when she was told the story of my survival, did have a change of heart. And so she carried him to term. She graduated from school on time with the love and support and resources of so many people, including our family. She went on to have other children. You know, we live in a world that wants to tell women that every obstacle is too much, that somehow they have to choose abortion in order to be successful. But we know the truth about life, and that every challenge is an opportunity. And that challenge was an opportunity for my family to step up and support my sister, for our school to step up and be truly supportive. And I am so grateful that even though my nephew knows that he could have been another statistic when it comes to abortion, he knows that that challenge at that time was an opportunity for his mother to find her true empowerment and for her to love herself and to love him. And I, of course, learned the story of my survival about that same time. It was through my sister finding out about my story that I ultimately learned it. It was a very traumatic kind of experience, you might say. During an argument one night, my sister let it slip that there was more to my life story than I ever could have imagined. And so picture with me 30 years ago what it must have been like for me to sit down at the age of 14 on a cold October night and ask my mother to explain to me why my sister felt like she was more wanted by her biological parents than I was by mine. As two fellow adoptees, I felt like we were raised on pretty equal footing when it came to being equally loved and equally wanted by our adoptive parents. And picture with me what it was like for my poor mother that night, having carried the secret of my survival for over 14 years, knowing that it was probably going to cause me great suffering, for her to have to break her silence. That night, my mom spoke the words that she'd avoided for so long. Missy, your biological mother, had an abortion during her pregnancy with you, and you survived it. As you can imagine, my world came crashing down that night. Again, it doesn't matter how many years I've been doing this work. It doesn't matter how many, probably thousands of times I've told my story. That moment still makes me emotional. Because I can tell you whether you're 14 or you're 90, which that happens. We have survivors who are 90 years old in our network. And we find out in various ways, at various stages, at various ages. I can tell you no matter what age you find out that you survived a failed abortion, there is incredible suffering. We are born into rejection, no matter how loved we ultimately are. And that night, I grappled with every human emotion as you can imagine. The anger, the resentment, the disbelief, the shame. Oh, the shame. So much shame we carry as abortion survivors. That somehow we deserved this, that somehow there must have been something so wrong with us, that we live in a society that says that people like us don't exist, or it's a choice or a right. And as you can imagine, the weight of that shame on a 14-year-old was crushing. And so I struggled with my existence for a number of years, questioning in the midst of my pain what my purpose must be. I knew God had a purpose and a plan for me, but sometimes our purpose is fully eclipsed by the pain we're in. But I love that in the midst of my pain, God continued to show me that he had a plan for me. And I think the most powerful thing he allowed me to do all those years ago was forgive my biological parents for the first time. And I say first time because for me, forgiveness is not a one-stop destination that I get to arrive at. It is a deliberate choice I make on a daily basis to choose to forgive in the midst of circumstances and things that I learn about my story. And for me, my faith is just a huge part of my forgiveness journey, of course. I picture Christ on the cross every single day and remember that he died not just for me and not just for you, but for people like my abortionist and people like my grandmother who set out to harm me. That is life-changing. And that changed my life so much to forgive my biological parents and set them free for the first time, because it set me free and ultimately set me out on this journey of sharing with you all tonight. That's what allowed me to go forward and go looking for my birth parents. I started looking for them when I was about 19, and I didn't find them until I was nearly 30 years old. I learned a lot about them over the years. It was kind of like piecing together a puzzle. I would find a piece and I would place it together and wait for the next piece to find out where it fit. And maybe some of you have lived out those years of your life too, where you are desperately seeking God's will and you're matching it up with this puzzle that you had laid out for your life. You know, it doesn't often match up, our will and God's plans, and that's okay. I hope that you find peace and encouragement in that through me sharing my journey with you tonight. I also learned a lot in those 10 years of searching about what God's timing really does look like. We talk about God's perfect timing, but in reality, most of us really don't always love God's perfect timing, right? I can laugh about it because I remember in the midst of my struggle thinking, 10 years of searching, Lord, this is not what I had in mind. But I had a lot to learn in those 10 years. And of course, as I continued to learn and to grow in God's perfect timing, all of those puzzle pieces finally started to be placed together. And suddenly in 2007, I finally obtained my medical records that clearly document the abortion that I survived. I am one of the few abortion survivors who does have any medical record. And in my medical records, you can read a lot of interesting things like a saline infusion for an abortion was done but was unsuccessful. You can also read in my medical records how they listed out a complication of Ruth's pregnancy as a saline infusion abortion. Abortion certainly complicates people's lives. And not just children like me, but it complicates the lives of the women and the men, and ultimately families and communities. But through those medical records, I ultimately read one really important detail, and that was Ruth's name, along with my biological father's. That's how I learned that my birth mother's name is Ruth, because in one little tiny corner, they forgot to black out my birth parents' names. I am so grateful for what people would say is a mistake, but I know in my heart is really just a part of God's continued hand in my life. He cared about that little detail, knowing that I needed to find out who my birth parents were. And maybe you can relate to what this is like. The minute I found out who my biological parents were, I jumped at the computer that night and I started to search to see if I could find them. And of course, it's now one of those really kind of famous details about my life. When I started searching that night, I learned that I was living in the very same city as my biological father. I had moved to Sioux City, Iowa during my 10 years of searching for my birth parents, knowing that that's where my birth mother's abortion had taken place. But I always suspected maybe they changed some details in order to keep the secret about my birth parents. And of course, 30 years later, even if that had been the place, I never thought for a second that I had biological family still there. But God knew. And of course, when I learned that I was living in the same city as my birth father, I prayed. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed for many months before I did what I knew I was being called to do, and that was to send my birth father a letter. And so I did just that in 2007, sending it to his office and not his home, trying to protect him a little bit. Essentially told him all the things I've told you all tonight, and that we were living in the very same city. If he ever wanted to communicate or establish a relationship with me, that I would be waiting to hear from him. It's been nearly 15 years now, and there was never any kind of response. And as I close my time with you tonight, you're going to learn about why it was that my birth father never replied to my letter. But as you could imagine, back then, it brought up all those old feelings that I had felt when I first learned my story, that maybe I really was unloved and unworthy, that nobody would ever want to hear from me. But my faith reminded me that that wasn't anything that defines me. I know those are the whisperings of the enemy, and maybe you experience them from time to time too. And so I had to put my faith in God once again, and I turned my sights on my birth mother and her family. I couldn't find my birth mother through my searching, but I had found her parents very easily. That grandmother that I told you all about. I didn't know back then that my grandmother played the role in the abortion taking place that she did. And so I had reached out to them, simply asking for them to reach out to my birth mother on my behalf. I was never expecting any kind of reply because I had never heard from my biological father. But within just a few short days, my grandfather did reply. In his letter, he admitted that my live birth was not their intention that day at the hospital, which I think was courageous. But he went on and he shared a couple of things about my biological family, and they remind us why the work of your pregnancy care center is so important. And so I want to share two of those points with you. One point my grandfather shared was that my birth mother, Ruth, had never told anyone about her abortion. And we know she's not alone in that. So many women and men carry the secret of an abortion throughout their lives. And whether it's you or somebody you know, I always want people to know that there is hope and there is healing to be found even after an abortion. I think that is one of the most important things that we can do to restore a culture of life, whether it's in Canada or the United States or another country. We need to bring healing to those who have been hurt by abortion. But my grandfather made a second point in his letter, and I also want to share that with you. He shared that my messages would not be passed along to Ruth because in reality, they were completely estranged. Can you feel that? I felt it in my heart all those years ago, and I couldn't understand it. But as I started to piece together more of our stories, I learned that feeling that I felt even when I first read that letter. That abortion 44 years ago forever impacted the relationships in my birth mother's family. Abortion doesn't just end a life most of the time. It impacts relationships and it changes families for generations unless healing occurs. And that's the last time I heard from my grandparents was 14 and a half years ago now. And that is also when I came forward with my story for the first time as an abortion survivor. My background is actually as a master's level social worker. And as I started to learn more about my story and obtain my medical records, I knew that God was calling me forward to share his story with the world. And so the very first time I was given an opportunity to speak was around that same time after I found my medical records, found my biological family, and then I was given this opportunity to speak. And the first time I ever spoke was in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. And I know in Canada you like to follow our politics, so you know that that's a very important place for us. And as you can imagine, it's not a really friendly place for somebody like me with a story like this. But the first time there in Washington, D.C., it was a fairly friendly crowd. But I'll never forget going home and telling my husband, yeah, I'm never going to do that again. I said, I was so sick to my stomach. I was a bundle of nerves. What I thought was a horrible case of nerves, sharing my story for the first time, was actually a really horrible case of morning sickness. We learned really quickly that I was pregnant with our first daughter, Olivia, who is going to be 14 years old now, believe it or not. I know many of you have seen her growing up over the years. Liv will be 14 in the spring, and I am also blessed to be the mother of a 7-year-old, Ava. But it was the first time I spoke publicly here, I was just a few days pregnant with Liv. And it was during my pregnancy with Liv that I started to travel the world in defense of life. Really early on, I was coming up to Canada, which I am so thankful for. But here I was, starting to travel the world in defense of life and experiencing my first pregnancy and loosening my grip on my career as a social worker to fully accept this calling for my life. And what I never could have imagined is at the same time, my birth father was actually home here in the United States fighting for his life. That's why my birth father never replied to my letter, because he passed away about 6 months after I sent it to him. I ended up learning that my birth father passed away in January of 2008, not long after his passing, by very innocently Googling his name on the internet one night. And maybe some of you have lived out similar moments to that too, where you question God despite your faith. When I stumbled across my birth father's obituary online, I questioned God, how that could have ever been the plan after searching for him for over 10 years to find him and then lose him. God spoke plainly to me, though, in my grief and reminded me to be patient because his plan was much greater than the one I had in mind for it all. And as the months unfolded, I got to see God's great plan. It actually involved our Olivia being born at St. Luke's Hospital in 2008, the very same hospital where my life was supposed to end. And not long after Olivia was born there, some really important people came into my life. My biological father's family. After my birth father passed away, they went to clean out his office and they found the letter that I had sent him months before that. I am so grateful that in the midst of their grief, my grandfather and my great aunt entered into my life. My grandfather was a part of my life and my family's life until he passed away early on in the pandemic at the age of 91. My great aunt is still a part of our lives still today. And even though I am so thankful for those relationships, the reality is our family has been forever impacted by that abortion attempt. And my own grandmother passed away years ago before she could ever bring herself to meet me, my biological father's mother. And I think that's a lesson for us all, a reminder that abortion really does impact each and every one of us, whether it's talked about or not. And even though it's hard for me to see my biological family still walk through the pain of abortion, I still have hope. And I hope that you do too, because God's not done. He's not done working in their lives, and he's not done working in yours, and he's not done working in mine. And as I close my time with you tonight, I want to share with you my other great source of hope. And that comes from seeing what has been happening in my birth mother, Ruth's life. Even though I didn't hear from Ruth initially when I contacted her family, back in 2013, I was contacted by another member of her family. And that member of their family actually is from Canada. My birth mother, Ruth's cousin, Susan, who lived in Canada at the time, reached out to me. That's how I learned that the abortion was forced, that my grandmother was responsible for so many things. That's how I learned the greatest secret that even my adoptive parents didn't know about my survival. And that is that Ruth spent over 30 years of her life believing that I had died that day at the hospital. I'll let that one sink in for a minute. Ruth didn't know for over 30 years that I had survived that abortion. She was told that it had been successful. She didn't know if it had been a little boy or a little girl. All she knew is that she lived with incredible regret from that day. And sadly, you now realize that my biological family kept that a secret from her. Abortion impacts people in such a huge way. And so Ruth lived with incredible regret. And so when her cousin reached out to me, that's how I learned this terrible secret. But that is ultimately what led me to start communicating with Ruth and building walls of trust and love with her. We spent about 3 years building those walls of trust and love before we finally met face to face for the first time. I am so grateful that my birth mother, Ruth, is now a huge part of my life. And so are my two half-sisters, Jennifer, and my other sister, Sarah, lives out in Maine. She is a professor. And what I love is that, as if it wasn't enough for us to be reconciled to one another and have one another in our lives, there is one big detail about Ruth's life that I never even knew. And that is that my birth mother, Ruth, actually lives in Kansas City, Missouri. If you know anything about my family right now, we actually live in Kansas City, Missouri. We moved here back in 2013, and that's why her cousin reached out to me when she did, because they knew that it was a sign that it was probably time to start breaking their silence and breaking through those secrets that they had kept. So I moved from Sioux City, Iowa, where my birth father lived, to now the city where my birth mother lives. God had a plan for me and for them. And God has a plan for each and every one of you, and for the women and the men and the children that are being served through your pregnancy care center. And I hope that you find encouragement and inspiration as I share that detail with you. Because if he can accomplish what he has in Ruth's life and mine, there is nothing that he can't accomplish in each and every one of your lives. And I am so thankful for how that circle of life has been closed. The pain and the suffering, the secrets and the shame. Isn't it amazing when you hear the story of my life and Ruth's, how the circle of life has been able to be lived? And for me, it is a circle of life that is about reconciliation and restoration. It is about life and love and forgiveness. And I know that this is my calling, to be reconciled with my birth mother and offer her that love and forgiveness, and to be involved in pro-life ministry around the world, saving lives and healing and empowering and equipping people. But every one of us has a calling when it comes to lives being saved and transformed. And this is your opportunity tonight to answer God's calling in your life. You know, most of us are not called to be public speakers, and I know most people are really grateful for that. But each and every one of us have the opportunity to answer God's calling with our time, through volunteering, through prayer, through time on the sidewalk. We all have the opportunity to answer God's calling with our talent. You know, whether it's planning events like this or other events in your community that offer opportunities to women and men in need and ultimately save the lives of children like me. Every single one of us have financial treasure that we can offer up so that the Pregnancy Care Center can save and transform lives. You know, everything from keeping the lights on in the office to, you know, providing information about fetal development, to providing that ultrasound, the material assistance they provide that truly helps someone in a time of need. The mobile clinic, your exciting mobile clinic. Your financial treasure is what is going to allow that mobile clinic that you've already seen in the community to be going out and reaching those abortion-minded, abortion-determined women so that they are provided resources and support and ultrasound so that they can be connected and make a life-affirming choice for their child. We all have a calling, and you have the opportunity tonight to say yes, just like I've said yes in my life time and time again. Tonight, you get to say yes with your time, your talent, and your treasure so that lives like mine can be saved, and lives like Ruth and my biological father, Elliot, they can have the choice for life, the resources and support that allow them to make that life-affirming decision. And as we talk about your gifts tonight, there are a couple of gifts I want to talk about. Those one-time gifts that people are often very familiar with. When you come to an event like this or you watch online and you give that gift tonight, of course, every gift is taken and multiplied. And we know on behalf of the Pregnancy Care Center, they are so grateful for any gift you can give. One-time gifts, of course, are very important to this ministry. But recurring gifts, so those monthly, quarterly gifts, are what are really sustaining for this ministry. If the pandemic didn't teach us anything else, I think it taught us that those regular recurring gifts really provide consistency and stability to ministries like this, so that they don't have to worry about when the next fundraiser might be, so that they know that if they can expect your monthly gifts or your quarterly gifts, they can provide that consistency and stability that they have in their budget through their programming, and not worry about that. They can set their sights on meeting the needs of the women and men and children that they serve, and casting their vision on how they can continue to make this great impact. And so one-time gifts are important, but those recurring gifts, if you have the opportunity that you could give a recurring gift, it provides such stability to this ministry. You, of course, could give both a one-time gift and a recurring gift, and I always challenge people to do that. Even if it's a small recurring gift on top of your one-time gift, that means making a minor sacrifice, like giving up your trip to, your local Tim Hortons. I'm a fan, but could you give up a cup of coffee at Tim Hortons so that you could make a larger one-time gift, or make a monthly recurring gift and a one-time gift? Think about how many combinations, how many ways you could make that happen. You can give your one-time gifts or your recurring gifts by mailing them in, and someone there tonight will be sharing that mailing address with you. But I also know that as we have this in the format that we do, you will be making online gifts. And so I went ahead and made myself a note. You can make your online gifts through chilliwackprolife.com. If you want the very specific website address, it's chilliwackprolife.com/getinvolved/online-donation. I'm going to say that again. That specific address is chilliwackprolife.com/getinvolved/online-donation. I also did a little bit of digging, and I see that you can go straight to the Canada Helps website. You would put in the Chilliwack Pro-Life Society and be able to drill down to provide through that website directly also. But your direct link is through chilliwackprolife.com. Thank you so much for your time and attention tonight as I shared my story in support of this ministry. And thank you, Chilliwack, for all that you are doing in defense of life and providing true resources and support to women and men in need.
Thank you so much, Melissa. What a powerful story that was. And if you're interested in buying Melissa's book, You Carried Me, and knowing more details of her story, you can pick one up here at the office. Just curious, has anybody here read her book already? Let us know down in the comments. Just to follow up with some clarity on different ways to give this evening, there are several options. You can text GIVE to the number that you can see on your screen, or you can go online at chilliwackprolife.com. E-transfers are accepted at office@chilliwackprolife.com, or you can mail your contribution to P.O. Box 171, Chilliwack, BC V2P 6H7. We're now going to take a 3-minute break to give some of you time to donate or use the washroom if you would like. But stay with us, as we have several more things on our program. Right after the break, you'll hear a touching poem authored and recorded right here in Chilliwack by Maxina Kovacs. Maxina is a former pro-life office intern who studied political science and international studies, did a parliamentary internship, and is now enjoying being a stay-at-home mom to her son Everett.
among those with pro-life views, there can be a tendency sometimes to undervalue the effort and the time it takes to care for those who are vulnerable in our society, including babies, the elderly, those who are sick. And I've noticed this in myself as well sometimes. So this poem is a bit of a reflection on my own decision to make the choice to prioritize caring for my son, and just what that has meant in my own life, and hopefully it can serve as a reflection of how this can be seen in your life, in other areas of our society. So I hope you enjoy.
My World by Maxina Kovac. In spring, the wanted child came, inconveniently as babes are wont to do. They say it is an impetuous desire to be a mother, an unruly thing to wake to feed another. Don't throw your life away, you're young, just wait. But a child waits not, is hungry now, is born to cry. My arms can do little else than rock this new voice protesting the world. I shut the door, the voices fade. I run my fingers along rows of memory, stacks of achievements almost done. Order, discipline, perhaps brilliance, the edges fade and run. What else matters when the world needs a mother? My work has just begun. Come back, make your mark, fix the broken world, you can have it all. But here I sit, my world in my arms, for the world, after all, is small.
Welcome back, everybody, from that short break. Wasn't Maxina's poem so profound? Now, we want to hear from you how the Circle of Life Gala is going for you so far. So drop us a comment on YouTube or Facebook with your thoughts, because we'd really like to hear from you. And now, we think it's time for a couple more door prize draws. Are you guys ready?
We're ready. Here's our Pasta Tuesday.
So we're going to pick a name from the basket, and Dave and Sue Hurst. Congratulations.
Yay, congratulations.
You guys can come and pick up your prize on Patton Avenue next week. And we're not done yet. We have one more to go. Here we're giving away a gardening kit. And the winner is Nadine Weiss. Congratulations. And again, you can pick up your prize next week on Patton Avenue. Congratulations. The pro-life movement is composed of thousands of organizations and hundreds of millions of supporters worldwide, but it's traditionally lacked a single well-known unifying flag. However, last year there was a public design contest, and a flag was created by pro-lifers for pro-lifers. The winning flag's design consists of 2 feet, 2 hands, 2 stripes. Love them both. We are proud to present to you this international symbol of the pro-life movement, the new pro-life flag. And now for our final speaker, Mr. Laurie Throwness, former MLA of Chilliwack, Kent, who is also a member of the board here at Chilliwack Pro-Life.
Well, hi, my name is Laurie Throwness, and it was my privilege to be an MLA for this area for 7 years. As one who values life from conception to natural death, I wanted to speak a message of encouragement to the annual March for Life event on the steps of the BC Legislature in Victoria. But when I told my colleagues what I wanted to do, one of the leader's top assistants came to me and said, "Oh, Laurie, please don't do this." But I said, "Why wouldn't I? It's a harmless message." And I did it then, and years after too, until it became almost routine. Let's not be afraid to say what we believe. You see, we have the most positive message in the world. We care about every person, no matter their weakness or their age. Any other position, anything less is indefensible. Just show me the child that you can throw away or the vulnerable adult you can cast aside. It's unthinkable. And if we keep to our message, we'll win in the long run, because in the long run, love wins. I'm sad to say that the federal government has promised to remove the charitable status of pro-life organizations in Canada. So we've drawn up a petition against this for our Member of Parliament to present in the House of Commons. We hope you'll drop around to our office at 45762 Patton Avenue in downtown Chilliwack. to say hello and to sign our petition. I joined the board of the Pro-Life Society several months ago, and I've been so impressed with the commitment and competence of the board and staff. They are wonderful people doing a difficult job in a society that is sometimes hostile to them and our cause of life. You can be sure that your money is carefully and well spent, so I hope you'll give generously to our Pro-Life Gala tonight.
Thank you so much, Laurie, for taking a stand for life in the public sphere. Just a reminder, if you're watching as a group, please be sure to take a picture of it and email it to us at office@chilliwackprolife.com and or post it to social media with the hashtag Circle of Life, and you'll receive a special hosting gift. And just for fun, you can post it in the comments to Facebook or YouTube so we can all see who's watching with us. For those of you that may want to join our post-gala activity, you can join us for virtual trivia game afterwards. So just head on over to chilliwackprolife.com for that. Or if games aren't really your thing, we have a few extra bonus videos for you that'll be playing after we finish up here. And if you want to watch longer, you can feel free to do so. And hey, we would love your feedback. So please email, text, or message us on whatever platform you're watching from and let us know what you thought was great and what could be improved on. We would really, really like to hear from you. Check out the slide for more things we would love to know from you. It would mean a lot to us if you could share this link on social media or through email to extend our reach. One thing that we all have in common here is that we all had somebody who cared about us enough to give us the gift of life. And that's what we're about here. Preserving, encouraging, teaching, and celebrating the sanctity of all human life, especially the lives of the most vulnerable among us. Everybody attending this gala should be proud that you are supporting the most important cause of all, the cause of life. Thank you all, and God bless.
I was always pro-life growing up, but it wasn't until I saw an image of a baby that had been killed by an abortion that I really kind of started to get more of a passion for it. And then I realized also growing up that I had a testimony of my own that I didn't even know about, because when my mom was in her first year of university, she went to Trent in Peterborough. She experienced an unplanned pregnancy. And she came from a large Christian family, so she didn't want to tell her parents right away, and she didn't even tell my dad right away. So she went to the nearest hospital. It was right by campus, and she was sitting alone in the waiting room, awaiting the results of her pregnancy test. And the doctor came in and said, yes, you are pregnant. And the very next words out of the doctor's mouth were, I'm pro-baby and everything, but I can schedule you an abortion. So before that doctor asked her anything about what she wanted to do, told her anything about her pregnancy, or explained anything to her, the very first thing that doctor offered her was an abortion, and even worse, after acknowledging the humanity of her unborn child. I definitely felt like she was a strong woman for doing what she did. It wasn't easy for her or for my dad. My dad finished university with a baby and a toddler, and he's holding me in his graduation picture, which I also find very admirable. As many people know, it's very difficult to have a child while going through school. And they didn't have any money. They started off fairly poor, but they made it work. And even though, for instance, they didn't have a car right away, my mom turned it into a positive and said that she grew very athletic because she was strollering me all over the city. So I think that, this just made me admire my parents even more. And it also helped me when talking to other abortion-minded women that they are strong enough, just like my mom was strong enough. And, regardless of their situation, there is help out there for them, and they can overcome what they're going through. Something unplanned doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, and that it can turn into something flourishing and something beautiful.
If there hadn't been a law against abortion when I was born, I know I wouldn't be here today. I well remember sitting at a caregiving bedside to my birth mother, and she was going through a rough spot in her life. I was in my mid-30s, and she took me by the hand and she said, "I'm so glad I didn't abort you." And then she started to tell me about why she looked for an abortion. In fact, she attempted 4 times to abort her pregnancy with me. And here we were, some 35 years down the road, needing each other desperately, and keeping that unplanned pregnancy that she had. I was conceived in stress. I don't really know who my father was. I caused a lot of problems for her in arriving as an unplanned pregnancy into her body, invading her future, and somehow, through the goodness of God, my life was spared. My life was spared. And my birth mother tells the story of keeping me until I was 2 years old, and then just not being able to cope with the stress of being a single mother back in the day when there were no social supports for single moms. She tells the story of putting me in a crib, lining up baby bottles, and her having to go off to hairdressing school while she hoped I would figure it out. And my understanding of the story is it was my cries caused the neighbors to call Child and Family Services. And, you know, there's lots of stories you don't quite figure out, but all you know is that being an unplanned pregnancy caused tremendous disruption in my birth mother's life. But through it all, somehow God had a way in just saying, this is not a throwaway child. And so I'm thrilled that I was adopted by a loving home, not an easy home. The adoption was very difficult on the home I went into. And I'm thrilled that adoption was a great, great option for me. And I know that had abortion been a legal option in Canada back then, I would not be here today.